Hello, welcome back to the channel. I have a great panel today to discuss Inside Out 2. I think no one can deny its success at the box office, and we're going to dig a little deeper into perhaps why it did so well, what we liked, things that we weren't sure about, if there were any things. But I have a great panel to discuss this film. And I have to say before, I was so nervous going into this movie because I was really worried it wasn't going to be good just because there's been a few letdowns. But at the end of the day, I was just pleasantly surprised about, the care that was put into this film. So I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys today. We can start with John. You want to say hi and your thoughts on the film?
Hi, John Automates. I like the film. I think, well, you had called it, and we had been on streams together where you were talking about like you thought it would be good, but as long as the writing and everything held up to par, and you were absolutely correct, and it's doing well, and I'm happy it is doing well because we need, especially animated, you need to have animated movies that actually say something and actually are good, be at the top, so that we know, similar to like, we know where to go rather than something like Minions, which is kind of just throwing it, something like that. But yeah, I liked it. Liked the movie. Lewis Black as Anger, still my favorite, and I'm sure everybody kind of has their own favorite emotions and everything like that. But I'm glad it's doing well.
It's funny because I didn't actually have that high of praise about the first one. Like, I enjoyed it like everybody else, but there was something about it where I felt that it focused so much on joy and sadness and really just the emotions in general, to the point where I didn't feel like Riley was a concrete character. And the fact that they made so many decisions for her, it was a little tricky, in my opinion, to like really feel the pain that she was going through, which is a really tough thing to say because the arc that she goes through in the first one is a pretty relatable one, considering half the kids we know have like moved from different cities or just not even different cities, different schools, and feel the exact same kind of peer pressure. So I can acknowledge the story was there. And I mean, the performances were all good. The animation was solid. And I have no shame in saying that Bing Bong made me cry towards the end because that was just such a tender moment. And like everything, all the pieces were in the right place. I can't explain why I didn't love it. Maybe because I say this like in the first 10 seconds of my review, I didn't think it was best animated feature quality because there were two movies that came out that same year that were nominated. One of them was Studio Ghibli's When Marnie Was There, which is hands down one of my all-time favorites, and a Brazilian one that no one had heard of called Boy in the World that was very unique, especially compared to animated stuff that's made nowadays. But it wasn't until I saw the trailers and I saw what kind of new emotions were being played out, and I just sat there and went, you know what? This is kind of the story I was looking for in the first one. And I gotta say, from like frame one, I was instantly hooked, and everything that people loved about the first one is what I really connected to with Inside Out 2. I felt like the mythology was a lot bigger, the world building was more imaginative, and because Riley has more free will and there's arguably a little bit more of a relatable storyline, because whether you're elementary, high school, or even well into your adulthood, fitting in is just fucking difficult.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. How about you, Zane?
Me, in terms of the movie, I personally loved it mainly because like the first one, like Tyler had said, like I enjoyed it like everybody else, but it did focus a lot on joy and sadness, and it kind of left the other emotions in the dust, which I didn't really focus on. Bing Bong part had me, and I was all teared up with that. I'm not gonna even lie. So when they showed the second one in the beginning, when she was sleeping in the bed, and you see a little statue of Bing Bong, I said, no, oh no, they're starting too early. They're starting too early. But I felt like they really did their homework with emotions, especially with anxiety. I don't know if there's a spoiler alert. I can't say nothing. I can't say nothing about it.
No spoiler. We can do spoilers for this. So 100% spoilers. Yeah.
Okay. So that moment where she was at the machine and she was going so fast because she was trying to just do every single possibility and just really predict it. I said that right there. I couldn't even breathe at that point. When they got to that point, I was like, I related. And then when they triggered to the point where she was actually having an anxiety attack, I never thought that Pixar would go that far. Like they got the sweat down, the graphics. I'm like, oh my god, she's having an anxiety attack. They actually captured it. And then that was it for me. I said this movie's getting an Oscar. I didn't even have to finish the rest of the movie. Like they just did their homework. And then I love how they gave each emotion a sense of like they got everyone their light, like embarrassment, disgust, like boredom. Everyone got their highlight and you really understood, and it translated into Riley, into her emotion. And everything just played out, especially with anxiety. Like, hey, maybe we should do this. And then Riley was just like kind of did the same thing. I'm like, oh my God, is that what that is? It's like I never understood. And then that's what it translated to, especially when it comes to like fitting in.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
Brittany from Cinematic Counselor.
Yeah, so Inside Out 1 was my favorite movie. I'm a school counselor. I worked primarily with elementary up until this last year, where I now work with high school. And I feel like it depicted, I feel like joy and sadness are like your two core emotions, right? And I loved how it demonstrated the importance of sadness. But the Inside Out 2, I think I had lower expectations maybe because I loved the first one so much and I was prepared to be let down. But I was not. I loved how they depicted each emotion. I love the addition of ennui, especially from a teenage standpoint of like, oh, I'm so bored. That's so real. And then, yeah, how they depict panic attacks was so spot on. And I like the buildup too of like, even Joy getting rid of all these painful memories and throwing them out. And the reality is like, that's when anxiety does start to take over, is when we try to suppress those painful memories and hold down all of our emotions. And it really does like give way to anxiety leading our lives. And so I liked how spot on it was. I know for the first movie and most likely for this one, they worked so closely with a team of psychologists. And so I liked how it was very clear that they did their homework on this and developed the characters really wonderfully.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting thing to see visually of her getting rid of all of those bad memories and then coming to that conclusion of like, oh, well, anxiety's been trying to take over. Like I'm maybe as Joy, like trying to take over too, because I don't want to hurt her, but that's not being beneficial to her overall psyche. And I love concepts too of like the belief, like the belief tree or what I forget what it was called, if you guys might know.
Her sense of self.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I found out recently that was like not an afterthought, but they started to include that way later on in the development of this movie. And I feel like that's just like the cherry on top of this, beautiful cake of what it is like to be a human being and those core beliefs. Yeah. What did you guys think about like the way they demonstrated the whole, those key moments, throwing them away and the belief, the sense of self, and kind of that like balance that is a struggle. I'm sure it's like a good representation of, I think as you said, Brittany, like as the child version of Riley, like we saw in the first one, those are kind of like such dramatic emotions to have, because that's really what you can't process a lot at that age. It's kind of like, oh, I'm happy, oh, I'm sad, or like, and it's kind of like it's infantile for a reason. And then like when you start to get into this teen years, I loved the when she wakes up and the sensitivity of the desk that they're using. I thought that was so clever because everything to a kid that age is so dramatic,
Yeah, it's interesting how they formulate like who's in control of Riley. Like, no, I'm in control. No, but the team that she had originally, they're like, we let Joy handle it and then we chime in, they work together. But it was interesting how Joy was trying to get rid of anxiety, but anxiety got rid of Joy. It's like, you're actually in my way. We don't need you. We need to prepare. And I thought it was going to be a conflict between fear and anxiety, but they made it work.
Yeah.
Because I was like, isn't that like kind of like the same thing? You know what I'm saying? And then the
Right.
boredom, I thought that would have easily been depression, but it's different.
Yeah, I really like the description they gave too of like fear. Okay, you're the fear of what we can see.
Yeah.
And then anxiety is the fear of what we can't see. And anxiety is the fear of the future, right? So it's all the different possibilities. And I like the way they played that out versus just the like just fear.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Oh,
how you
anxiety
need
was
it.
smart.
Complex.
Anxiety was smart too. You know what the best thing about this movie is to me? The fact that they use sports as a way to kind of introduce those things.
That's
Because
the perfect place.
yeah, it's literally one of the best things to do. Not, I think you could do it for. I think it might have worked with like bands, or it might have worked with like a club. But sports is very, because with the high school thing, a lot of kids do transition into sports. Some for the first time, and like I transitioned into sports for the first time when I was in 9th grade. I hadn't really played like that beforehand. So that whole thing of her trying to fit in with the older players, because like that whole like, well, you need to have a bit of a personality change. That's relatable, like extremely, extremely relatable. You're trying to make a team. Your friends are going off to someplace else, and you're trying to like see if you can have some new friends so that you're not stuck by yourself trying to figure out where do I fit in. All of that is extremely relatable. And I think them having the whole thing with the hockey team, like I said, it could have been anything, but I think it worked really well for sport.
Not just trying to bond with the girls on that team, trying to be like teacher's pet to that one coach in particular. Because like right from the get-go, Riley and her friends instantly knew who she coached for, how big a deal it was. And I do like that they point out that peer pressure isn't just among kids. Like kids are eager to please their adults if they think that it can not only benefit them, but just make them feel good that they're on the right path, especially. And in retrospect, I kind of would have liked maybe 1 or 2 more scenes of that coach, just because I will say, like, for the first half, it's good because she's such a people pleaser when she's watching the girls play for the first time. But once they end up at the camp, she's all of a sudden drill sergeant, which made perfect sense. And I like that. But
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder what would have happened if we got a scene where, I'm trying to think where it would be appropriate, but somewhere where the coach just looks at Riley and goes, hey, like, you don't think I never made mistakes like that in my past, didn't we? I mean, we all did. I felt like there was potential for at least one scene like that, but I mean, nothing was lost by keeping that out. And I also really like the fact that the girls that she's trying to impress are not inherently bad people. Like, I thought that Val girl was going to be like the mean girl who was like manipulating Riley, and it would be a much more painfully obvious decision, like what friends to gravitate towards. But no, it's really the other girls around her who are saying all of these microaggressions. And I love that this movie points out that, like, just because you hear what they're saying in a certain point of view doesn't mean that's actually what they're implying. That's just our heads filling in those gaps. I love that a movie from Disney and Pixar, of all things, actually has that kind of outlook, because it's really hard to find this day and age.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I really like the reality too of the islands. How like Friendship Island had grown so drastically and Family Island had shrunk. And that's what happens in adolescence, right?
Yeah,
Developmentally, like you're. Yeah,
I actually thought that's where the movie
is.
was going, to be honest. I thought the movie was really going to be about her choosing friends over family, but it didn't go in that direction. So it's kind of like, not that it was like misleading, but the way they kind of went about it was, I really thought that she was going to be like, oh, my friends are everything, and then literally forgot about her family altogether. And then they explore into family and revisit, like, you know, the past of like her with her mom, her dad, and whatnot. Like, that would have been interesting. But they kind of just like, hey, I'm just going to show you and just keep moving on.
Yeah, I think it was subtle, but it also, sorry.
No, you're fine.
It set the stage for the reality of like the issues she was facing of my old friends versus my new friends, and building that sense of self versus what I'm hearing all around me from my coaches, from these people, from the like main or the main girl on the team. I mean, it really did just set the stage well, even if it didn't play on the like family versus friends throughout the movie.
Right.
Yeah, and I do think that in your adolescence into teens into your 20s, I mean, I feel like I really I was never not connected with my parents, but like I feel like, you know, my mom and I really rebonded in my early 20s, mid 20s, because there is that family island does become kind of like not important. And I think that like that's just so normal, and it's not necessarily like you don't love your family. It's just it's such a complicated time. So I think like I agree with you that like the island thing was done really, really well in that sense.
I think it
Family
related
backdrop,
to
too.
yeah, but it also like her initial sense of self was built by her family,
Yeah.
and her kind of like new anxiety-centered sense of self is solely surrounded around her peers, and so I think that kind of set the
Yeah.
stage for that too.
Also, she goes like, I think that was also part of the fact that she goes away to the camp. So it's like, of course she's gonna, you know, like the family thing, of course it's gonna start to be smaller, because now you don't even have family to like really rely on like that. You need to figure it out within yourself, which not that that is exactly what it was, but it could have been a nice little metaphor for that as well, in terms of like what's going on there, where she really does have to come to grips without having that family help.
Especially because her phones were taken away. I can't remember.
That was wild to me.
I'm just sitting there, I'm like thinking, family emergencies, hello? Like, am I missing something here?
Like, what kind of camp is
story
this?
Thing. I did think that was a story thing on purpose, is why they tried to kind of make that happen.
But she didn't really care so much about the family for them to, like, all her friends are there anyway. So who is she really gonna contact?
I'm sure there was like a campus phone or whatever that would have been there for emergency or some crap like that. Like where I live in Canada, like we went to a trip to Ottawa, and there were phones that the teachers had in case we needed to call someone, and like we had an earthquake in the middle of that trip. So your ass, first earthquake in that province in like God knows how many years and cents. So that's how rare it is.
Do they even have phone numbers memorized?
Like,
right?
Honestly, she probably doesn't even know her parents' number.
The parents probably not, but I mean, yeah, that just
you know what's funny? Because we're older, we know like it made sense, but like to kids, they're so addicted to their phones that was to whoever's watching it, that age group. You take a phone, that's like whoa, they do that to us. We're just like.
Well, a phone is literally a sense of self for some kids.
Right. So that was like breaking.
And some adults for being completely honest.
Right. And you saw like they were, as the movie progressed, like, all right, I'm taking away your friends, I'm taking away your phone. They're like, you know what I'm saying? Now I got to make new friends. You're like, damn, she's really dealing with a lot in such a short amount of time. You know,
it's funny.
Yeah, sorry.
And it's fine.
Gets after her for like taking selfies with her friends and like being silly, and so the phones. I mean, that being taken away was huge.
Right, like Joy being too childish. It says like you can't be happy all the time. There has to be a point where you are serious and prepared. And I love how they kind of showed like instead of getting rid of anxiety, there's like we gotta work with anxiety. Yeah, it's good to be prepared, but not overly prepared. You know what I'm saying? It has to be like that medium, because it could have easily been the film where anger takes most of it because of that competitiveness. Like anxiety could have worked with anger for that matter, and it could have been a whole different movie, because then he gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then anxiety is just feeding him more and more and more, and then that could have been a meltdown.
Yeah, and I do kind of like that it's kind of established early on that anxiety and ennui could actually provide a lot of good help towards Riley. Because, I mean, there's that one instance where she does walk up to Val and apologizes for, like, making a scene in front of everybody and making them do the drills and whatnot. And I'm just sitting there going, wow, that actually worked? Yeah, you know what? Okay, that does actually kind of make sense. And that was the thing. For me, anxiety and ennui stuck out the most in regards to the new emotions, just because it's clear as day that they're doing everything for what they consider to be Riley's benefit. And it feels weird calling them villains because of that.
Right.
Especially because Maya Hawke and Io Adebari really threw their A game into these performances. Adebari, I had no idea she could be like this perky and energetic. I haven't seen her like that before, but that was really impressive. And I'm not super familiar with Maya Hawke's stuff, but
that's literally her. Like, that's her in real life.
Oh,
that's how she is. Yeah, that's really how she is. Like,
well,
oh
that's
God, I'm sorry. Like, it was perfect for her. Actually,
it's well casted.
Well, that's reassuring.
Like, and even in the interview, like they would ask her like, "Oh, who's your favorite Disney character?" And she said Shrek, and the guy's like, "That's not Disney character." She's like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry."
I do have one question because I don't see a lot of interviews. Does she look like a Muppet from Hell in real life too? Because
no.
She looks animated. She does.
She's kind of stunning, actually.
She's beautiful, but she's like very animated.
Because I'm exactly like her parents, like a combo of Uma Thurman and
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke, thank you. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. It's kind of funny because she was actually in my hometown that weekend for her Wildcat movie, and I heard iffy things about the movie, so I didn't actually go to that screening. But well, after hearing everything you guys just said, that is a hell of a start. But yeah, looking at Anxiety's freakish design that added to a lot of the suspense with this movie, especially when she completely takes over, and that fucking tornado throughout the climax that I think raised everybody's heart in this one. And I'm just sitting there thinking about like the director mentioning that Uncut Gems was an inspiration for the pacing and tone of this movie. And my fucking God,
it did.
I actually prefer the Uncut Gems tone in this over Uncut Gems because for starters, nobody's fucking talking over each other multiple times. That was one thing I couldn't stand about that movie.
Yeah,
they actually
much talking. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate when a movie does that. It feels like a cheap way of gaining tension. But one thing I also did notice is that as soon as a scene ends, there's really no 5 seconds of fresh air in between scenes like any other Pixar movie. It just goes right back to the next scene, next obsession. You are always on your toes. They really got that tone down perfectly.
Right, they let it breathe. Well. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. And then it was even how they even initiated, like she was going so fast that like she literally couldn't even touch her. And you're like, yo, just let go.
Yeah.
I mean, you just like everybody was just frozen.
Yeah. And I like the timing of this movie too, because I feel like post-COVID especially, I don't know anybody who hasn't experienced that to some degree. And like having this movie now and being able to put this like childish image of it into reality just kind of gives us all that like heartwarming, oh, I felt that moment. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, and Brittany, you and I had a brief discussion about this before we started. And like post-COVID, teachers and administrators in schools are in a nightmare scenario, and it's really difficult to just do what you want to do and you know, change the like improve the minds of the younger generations. So it is interesting. I honestly wish a movie like this had come out when I was talking to John about this like when I was like 9 or 10, just to prepare myself of like, it would have been so much easier to understand. And I love that they do at the end of the day, like you said, Tyler, like anxiety is not the villain. It's needs to be within us. But when it takes over, that's when it's a catastrophe.
Because we go into a spiral, that's exactly what it was. Like you go into an anxiety spiral and you just like, yo, just relax and slow down. You just talking a mile a minute. Like, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. Like, whoa, just chill out. Because I didn't know where they were going with it until she started to really crank it up. And then she's like, oh, we gotta do this. And then the machine started getting, I was like, oh my God, she's doing too much. She's doing too much.
She's a perfect segue. Me out. Anxiety is a perfect segue to become a sequel. That's your sequel character right there.
Oh, no kidding. And it's just insane how much clever world building they do in this. Like when they introduced the stream of consciousness, I instantly said it in my head, like, oh, that's the stream of consciousness. They didn't have to explain that. And then they say it anyways. But still, there are things that I'm picking up on just now, like the broccoli and the pizza floating in the stream. It just occurred to me that that's brain food. And that's a phrase I haven't heard in fucking years.
Right?
That was so funny, especially when it broke, and then there were like that was when anxiety was I guess she was changing things with envy, and then every time they talked across the gap, it sounded like sarcasm.
Sarcasm.
I was like, oh,
yeah,
guys are doing really a good job.
Yeah, between that and the office cubicles literally being a house of cards while they're imagining worst case scenarios. And I love that they just have to shout out Pixar's own crew, the fact that they're actually hand drawing all of these imaginary scenarios.
Right. I was like, so meta. He's like, guys, we got to keep drawing. He's like, you got to keep creating some more stuff. I was like, you're using imagination as prisoners to create more scenarios that have never happened before. I was like, oh my God, that makes sense. Because we're so creative, but it can also be used for bad. It can be used for good, but it can also be used
they need a cynic emotion. Somebody needs to come out and be cynic.
Oh, leave that for the third one. Leave that for the third one.
Because that's more of an adult emotion for the most part, but like you could this screams, and if Disney is smart, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But this screams like, okay, you could Toy Story this and just have her grow up.
Honestly,
and you have it.
But I think I think what's really cool, I was talking to my boyfriend about this the other day, is like the reality of the teenagers' emotions being so complicated with like ennui and embarrassment and anxiety and all the things. But then when it shows the adults' emotions, the parents, it's back to that core set.
Yeah.
And I love that, because like the reality is, as we grow and heal as humans and like learn how to have emotional regulation, we aren't having those extra, like we still have complex emotions, but they're rooted in the core emotions. That's why as therapists, as counselors, we don't use secondary emotions typically when we reflect back to adults what they're feeling. We'll say like, oh, you feel sad, like, oh, you feel angry, as opposed to like, you appear anxious, you appear, I don't know, cynical. Like those are all rooted in that core set. And I love that that's how it depicts it in the adults.
It's funny you mention the adult's point of view, because when Inside Out came to DVD and Blu-ray, there was a 5-minute short that they put on that was all about like what the parents think of that boy Riley meets at the end of the first one. And it started off pretty cringe, where they're instantly wondering, why is there a boy in my house? And the mom's just in there going, so what's the dealio with him? And inside Riley's head, they're just going, did she really just say Dilio? And it isn't until the dad and the kid start talking to each other where they find common ground in the fact that they were both in a band around that kid's age. Yeah. And it leads to them bonding in a way I'm not going to ruin for anybody watching, because the short actually is pretty funny, and I recommend people check it out, because Pixar shorts just do not get enough love these days. I'm really surprised there wasn't a new short playing in front of this. That would have been amazing.
I was wondering that the same. Like, why didn't we get a short? Like, that was one of the best parts, is you played the short.
Because it cost $200 million.
That's why.
But
I don't know. Like, when you look at it, I don't know, but like, even I didn't see Luca when it got re-released in theaters just because I didn't have time. But apparently they played the For the Birds short that played before Monsters Inc. They slapped that on to Luca, and I'm just sitting there going, yeah, it's, in my opinion, one of their best shorts. That would have been perfect. And I mean, you see that giant bluebird during the credits of Inside Out 2. And I'm just sitting there going, okay, that's kind of a neat Easter egg, but why is that in the end credits? It makes about as much sense as Sadness. I don't know if any of you guys picked this up, but when Sadness is looking at that mountain of forgotten memories, she's holding the binoculars from the first Toy Story, and I'm just sitting there going, wait, what? Like,
It felt like they just
that's an
wanted to throw
Easter
that in
egg.
just to throw it in.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
Bing
Yeah.
Bong, no one peeped that, and I had to
Mhm.
like she's asleep. It was literally right there, and I was like, "That's Bing Bong." And it was like, "Oh!" I was
And it's funny you
"Oh."
mentioned
in the feels.
It's funny you mentioned
Right.
that because I completely missed that. And as you guys bring up all this background shit that I missed the first time around, that just goes to show how much detail and thought went into just about everything in this movie.
Right, like nothing is really forgotten.
They can
I also
do
really-
some good things. They could do
And
some good things.
I can't remember if they showed it all at all in this one, but at least in the first when they're showing the adults, I also love that there are different emotions driving the mom
Yes.
and dad.
Yeah.
The mom is driven by sadness, the dad is driven by anger. And like the reality is we all have one core emotion that we feel more often than another. And so I just like these little details are so important.
Who do you think drives you?
I'm driven by
Right?
cynicism. I know that.
I was like, me,
I
I
have
think
a ball of anxiety.
I'm
all the
driven
time.
by sarcasm. that works with anxiety. That's what I feel like.
Yeah. Fear, if I was to pick one of the core, but unfortunately I think that would
I
be
think we're all
my
driven by fear now.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah, watching Anxiety gave me a real reality check as to what my core emotion might be on that one. But I'm just sitting there going, wow, is Pepe the Prawn literally controlling my head as we speak? It's like, that's what she fucking looks like.
Yeah, just so frizzled. Like she looks stressed. And I like they did a good job. Like, what does stress look like? That anxiety. Like, what would that look like? It's
Yeah.
like it's all over the place. That's what
Right down to the hair. That was just
And the
And it
fake
is-
smile.
Yeah, no, it is Muppet-like, and I think the overall character design was good because I think for younger kids, obviously this is a very complicated film when it comes to what they're actually talking about, and I think that like having that anxiety look like that is a character that kids will want to watch regardless.
Yeah.
I was really surprised. My theater was actually packed, and I went on a Tuesday or Wednesday, like pretty middle afternoon type of thing, and it was packed, and there were some little kids.
was out.
It was like, and they for the most part, like their attention span was great, which I was like, oh, there's hope.
that's
But, yeah.
That's interesting because like I saw it the opening Thursday. It was just one family for one older gentleman, like far in the far corner of my row. And that was it. And I'm just sitting there going, this is kind of weird. And when the movie was over, I'm just sitting there going, God, more people need to see this. And then I look at the box office numbers and I'm just sitting there going, okay, like what am I missing here?
Right, it doesn't make
My
sense.
theater
But
was
No.
packed, too.
I think
My
people
theater
were
was
kind of
packed.
like waiting for people's reaction, to be honest. And then also when the first movie came out, some people they're like, "Yo, you want to go see Inside Out too?" I was seeing it regardless. You know what I'm saying? If you're like a movie goer and you don't care to go with a group of people to see the movie, it's a kid movie. Like if you have that in your head, then you're not gonna be going to see the movie unless you have kids. But if you don't care for that, it's like I'm just gonna see the movie because like I really enjoyed the first one. I feel like that plays a major factor on why. But if it was just like it's not like the movie was just catered for kids. It's really like a nice range between like just a movie. It's not like, oh, this is a kid's movie. It just feels like a movie for everyone to enjoy. And that's when you'll see people like the range. You see an older gentleman for like a young person and whatnot. I think that's great. I think that's a win in my book.
I think one of the things I appreciate, so this is my first year working at a high school, and I found that kids don't give a fuck. Like I have the Inside Out Funko Pops in my office, and they all come in and they start playing with them, and they get so excited to see them. And these are like 17, 18-year-olds who are like, oh, I love that movie, just so excited. And I feel like when I was in school, I would have been like, oh, that's cool. Inside Out characters. Like,
No, but
just
it's different now. It's different now. Kids are they're repping the Minions. We saw what happened with them and all those kids who were like high schoolers going in suits and everything like that. Kids aren't afraid to rep the Sonic. Sonic's getting a lot of love from like older. I think kids now don't have the same fear that they used to have of like, I don't know if I'm a part of this group or that group or anything like that. I think now people just kind of rep what they want to rep.
I think it's more the society is more acceptable, to be honest, because it used to be like you need to do blank, blank, blank based on these roles. Now it just becomes so gray, which is perfectly fine. But that's the society that we're in right now, to the point where we could just go to the movies, we could wear what we want to wear without being like, look at Lil Uzi Vert, like he's I don't know what, like he's just wearing all types of stuff. What? How old are you? Like there's no. We don't have to match age to outfits anymore. You can just wear what you want.
Yeah, kids come to school wearing the like acne patches, and they'll be and like in their with their bonnets on, in their PJs, sporting their like Hello Kitty.
Oh, that's normal. Trust me.
That's normal. Oh
wild.
Man. I must
dude.
I'm a teacher myself, and I that's interesting.
You wouldn't send your kid there, but it is normal.
Dude, I see kids playing in their neighborhoods in their fucking pajamas. It makes no sense. When did that happen and why?
I think we started as college kids. We started it. That's what
we probably started it.
We started it.
TikTok.
Well, and it's funny.
TikTok erased shame.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up those little acne patches that look like stars or they're like glittery or whatever, because I remember seeing those advertised, and when they came out, I was like, but who would want to draw attention to that? And these kids are just doing it. They don't care, and it's become like a trend. And it's like, you know what? That's great, because I remember like I never had like bad skin issues, but I had a lot of friends that did in middle school and high school, and I feel like they would have been like not like the cool kid because of it, but it would have made them feel a lot better about that.
Right. And I love how like
care.
Riley had acne and they didn't like address that. Oh my God, I have that. Like she just, this is who I am. And that's it. I'm going about my day. You know what I'm saying? Instead of like really putting focus that, oh, I got a pimple like the old school 90s or early 2000 movies. And they just really hyper focus on, if you have this on your face, then you should feel uncomfortable. And they didn't do that. I was like, thank you.
Oh, nobody gave a shit about the braces either.
Right. Yeah. The braces too. Like they didn't be like, oh, let me hyper focus on the braces, because if you have braces, you're weird.
I think it's just so normal now.
Yeah, I did really appreciate when the puberty button was hit and she starts like having really strong emotional reactions. Like the emotions will touch the control board and the reaction's so over the top just with a light little tap. And that's so real. Like I am in my 30s and we'll have extreme emotional reactions and we'll be like, why did that happen? Like why was that so
it's like, don't push that button, please.
Right?
No, I love that. And I also love the fact that when she's kind of an asshole to her friends, or she is, you know, it shows like at that age, like you can have like the best intentions and you can be a kind person and a good friend. But because it's such a confusing time and you do want to fit in so much, because that is like the number one priority, at least it was in our generation, you know, to a lot of people. I think it humanizes that, because like I'll have like thoughts sometimes where like I always try to be a kind person when I was growing up, but like maybe like I did something that was kind of not the best, and like it's because like that's what's all going on with her, and I think that was demonstrated like beautifully in this movie.
Yeah, and I think like as a school counselor, that's what I deal with on a daily basis. Like I think it's regardless of generation. Students come in to me daily and it's typically about an issue with a friend, or like they offended their friend and they think that they can never be friends again, and like how heartbreaking that is. And they usually have the best of intentions along the way, but people get their feelings hurt and like they're still learning how to, I mean, we're adults, we're still learning how to coexist with other people. Like it's hard, and you can be the kindest, sweetest person and still struggle to like make those friends and to have perfect friendships.
Right.
Yeah,
making
for
new
sure.
friends is tough. Like it was just interesting. Like she had to make new friends. If we had to make new friends, like we kind of like do we fit in and start looking like them to fit in, or can we just be ourselves and allow them to accept us for who we are? like
Mm-hmm.
like that's something that's really tough, especially when we get older, because sometimes we want to just stay fixed, but we can still grow as we get older. We don't have to be that core character that we designed ourselves, that we're so comfortable for X amount of years.
But that's perfect that you said that, because I think that's where it's demonstrated with the battle between joy and anxiety. And it's like her core values of like, is she going to change so drastically with anxiety taking over the whole council? You know, that's exactly what I think was demonstrated in what you just said.
Right. And then when they came together, that creates your true self, is when they can all work together at once, opposed to individual. I'm like, oh, I was like, I can breathe. That was such an emotional scene. Like, it was just like, what is like it was like they were just cooking. They just kept on cooking. Like, we got you. We're gonna just keep on cooking.
And I love that the ending sense of self was part of that reality was all the hard memories that she tried to toss away.
Right.
That Joy tried to be like, I'm sorry, those aren't perfectly happy. I have no space for those. But the reality is those make up who we are, along with the joyous memories, along with the anxious memories. All those things create our core sense of self, obviously.
Right. And that was interesting. Like, you're going to let all those memories come in there. It's like, well, we got to get to the top. And then it looked like it was going to be like acid and destroy everything. But then all of a sudden it went from, oh, it's going to be bad, to, oh, this is starting to look good. No, you need that. This is, I was like, oh, it was great. It was great.
Well,
and I think that there's utility and anxiety too. Sorry. Yeah. I think there's utility and anxiety of like those feelings of I'm not good enough, when coupled with all these like powerful, wonderful sense of self things, isn't necessarily entirely bad. Like, it can be a driving force to help us become better. And that's where anxiety has its use. But if that's the only thing driving us, that's obviously where the issue is.
I wanted to bring up something real quick to ask all of you, because during the section where anxiety's taken over, and it's this very like Big Brother scenario with the animators, do you think that's a commentary on the animators and a lot of these companies overworked? I know there was that scandal with the Across the Spider-Verse animators and things like that, and the CGI people, because to me that's really was like in our faces of, look, like these people are like, you don't know their name, you don't know who they are, but they are killing themselves to make this one movie for this one big studio.
That's a really good way of putting it. And I got to be honest, that when that one scene popped up, I was more interested in looking for one of Pixar's A113 Easter eggs, because that has got to be their biggest. I didn't see one, but I could have missed it. But at the same time, yeah, you know what? That could be a real good commentary, because, I mean, when people look at that outlook, they look more at the visual effects artists for Disney and Marvel, and Netflix, because they all got fucked over so badly. Like, they release dates changed on them without being told, 14-hour workdays, like 7 days a week. That one YouTuber, Royal Ocean, has a really good video essay about the visual effects crisis these days. And you got to remember that it applies to CG animators all the way. Yeah. But I got to be honest, because it looked like because all those animation desks looked like 2D stuff where they were drawing stuff out, I was also just sitting there wondering, can Disney make a 2D movie again, please?
Just once.
One that's better than Wish.
No, more than once. And yes, better than Wish.
Yeah. Well, one that starts off at least good, so they have something to go off of.
Right. I don't know. Listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. That whole Wish movie was so poorly promoted, and I just felt like they just wasted time with that one.
Yeah.
Dude, I went to the Disney immersive experience like the very year that Wish came out, and for one, like, they obviously didn't promote it in anywhere. In fact, during the entire show, they didn't even show a clip of Wish. Everything was like Snow White up until Strange World was a weird acknowledgement, but I mean, yeah, that was.
Yeah.
But here was here's the interesting thing. It was strictly like 100% animated movies. No Mary Poppins, no Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And I'm just sitting there going, those count, and those are kind of better than what you've been putting out lately.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
I heard somewhere that Brad Bird was supposed to do a live action animated musical, and I'm just sitting there going, that was announced back in like 2018, 2019, and I'm just sitting there going, fuck.
I would love for them to do a 2D as well as tap into stop motion. Like just mix it up like how you used to do it. You know, you have the technology now. Like we still have anime that's like kicking. Like what if Pixar, you know what I'm saying? Like what if Pixar put their foot in and put like really gave us like a cell shaded 2D type of movie? I think that would change things.
I really hope that this was saying that that's going to happen, because like they even had the pouchy and
they pouchy.
My God, I have to
2D acknowledgement, and this was done so well.
And the best part for me is I think Bluefy in particular was maybe the part I laughed at the hardest, because I mean
I laughed so hard.
The meta jokes and Ron Funches actually being like really damn funny with the material he was given. I'm just sitting there going, my God, you guys could have been this great for fucking years.
Right.
Like you just thought of the shit now?
And it's so meta because they put it in the vault. It was like,
damn it.
They put it in the vault. And it's like, yeah, these are the things that we don't even do no more. We don't talk about that anymore. That's why it's in the vault. So when I saw that and they did different animations, it gave me that Gumball vibe. And I was just like, is that 2D or am I tripping? I was like, what? He's like, I'm giving you all I got.
Yeah.
I think what I loved so much about this movie, and kind of touching back to your question, Tracy, is like it did touch on current issues, right? It did have that meta vibe. It did like deal with very real things that are happening in today's world, right? But pretty much it took all the things that we're so annoyed with so many of these movies that are coming out now, and it gave it its magic back and like made it so beautiful again. And I feel like, I don't know, hopefully movies moving forward, especially Pixar, will take note and move forward with this.
Yeah.
Here's hoping, because I haven't seen any promos for that Elio one that was supposed to come out this year. Like it's not. I think it comes out like next winter year. Or something like that. But reading the plot synopsis, I'm just sitting there going, okay, sure, why not? But like, I shouldn't be looking at a Disney Pixar movie and just being so reluctant to see it. Like I saw that promo for The Wild Robot where they played What a Wonderful World, and I'm just sitting there going, this is fucking beautiful. Like, I don't even care if the trailer is lying to us. That looked amazing.
That trailer killed me before Inside Out 2. I was like, what is this?
See, I got the Wonderful World trailer for Kung Fu Panda 4, and the trailer that played for this one gave away too much of the plot, and it's pretty basic. But the style that DreamWorks is doing with this one, where it's kind of half 2D, half 3D, it still piques my interest. It's got a really good cast, and they just announced 6 of the movies playing at Toronto's festival this year, and it was one of the 2 that I'm interested in so far, so we'll see how that goes.
So that's Elio's coming out next year in June. Mm-hmm. They would have not survived if Inside Out 2 came out. No. That would have been a conflict of interest at that point. Like, yeah, because it would have overshadowed a new message. So they needed an entire year by themselves.
Yeah,
because Inside Out 2 ate it up. They left no crumbs.
Well, on that note, I would love to get like the final takes from each of you. I don't know if John, if you want to take it off from here.
Inside Out is going to have a sequel, because of course it will. Once Disney gets its eyes on money, they don't stop. But they have an opportunity to like actually make a movie grow with an audience, which they have not been able to do at all since the MCU days, where those movies grew with an audience. Otherwise, nothing else they've put out has grown with their audience, because they keep going back and forth with, well, should we do live action? Should we do 3D animation? Should we do 2D animation? So they don't know where they want their animation department to be. They are just starting to release sequels. Frozen got its sequel, but now they're like, oh, maybe we'll do something for like Zootopia and other things like that. But they're also trying to do cash grabs. So this might be one of those where it's like you have a legitimate movie that can grow with your audience, as well as have your audience introduce it to younger members of and introduce a new audience. And that's the hope, as long as they just kind of make sure that the execs stay out of it and they actually consult the people who actually are smart about the matter and move forward from there. That would be the hope.
I agree.
Yeah. How about you, Tyler?
I am happy to say I like this one more than the second. I mean, more than the first, damn it. But it happens. But I am still concerned about Pixar and Disney in particular, their future when it comes to the movies they're putting out. Because, I mean, I liked Soul. I liked Luca. Turning Red, just, I know a lot of people enjoyed it. I couldn't stand it. And Lightyear, and I think there was one other one they made that I just didn't see because
Elemental.
they have Elemental. Yeah, like they have good enough concepts and they've just been completely squandering them. And while I can appreciate that Bob Iger has at least acknowledged that they need to go back to making mass appeal. And of course, the people who liked all the movies I just mentioned are complaining, oh, well, you're just catering to like the masses. You don't care about like the smaller demographics. And I'm just sitting there going, no, they're trying to make movies for every demographic. In other words, the movies that fucking anyone can relate to, not a movie where you have to actually be these exact characters to relate to. Like, that was my issue with Turning Red. I won't get into specifics, but I mean, there are scenarios that I only learned in school and that was about it. And that wasn't the full gist of needing to know what this ship was about. But at the same time, Iger has also made it clear that he intends to focus more on franchises and sequels as opposed to original concepts. Like, Enrico Carasso, who made Luca, is apparently making an original movie, and I liked Luca, so I can only hope that that turns out well. But Disney, while they're doing damage control, is sending a lot of mixed messages, and that's really the only concern I've got at this point.
Yeah, it's fair.
Fair. That's fair.
How about you, Zane?
For me, I would have to say the last take is the way they went about going through each emotions was accurate enough that I didn't have to question, like, oh, that didn't make sense. Like, there was not one point in that movie where I was like, I didn't get it, or I think they went a little over the top. I felt like they really did their homework in terms of each character, and they also allowed each character to, like, each of the emotions to have their light. Like, especially when Anger said what he had to say, he's like, listen, I'm not always angry all the time. Maybe I was like, wait, what? Like, it was a very shocked moment and whatnot. And the fact that Fear had his moment where like, you have a parachute? Like, why don't y'all have parachutes? Like, it just, it gave each character, like, y'all, you did it, and it made up for the previous movie that they lacked in. They kicked out everyone, instead of just like, all right, we're gonna kick out just Joy and Sadness and do another adventure with them again. They gave us something different, and I appreciate that. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Brittany?
Yeah, I mean, I love this movie. I hope that Pixar does take note and actually continues to make more movies like this that kind of like what Tyler was saying is more generalizable, right? We all have emotions. We all can relate to this movie. It didn't really matter what the character, like what Riley looked like. It just was something that we all could relate to. And I really appreciated that.
Very well said. I have to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today on this panel discussion of Inside Out 2. I hope if you've been watching this, you've already seen it. But if not, and you've had everything spoiled, definitely go see it. It's hot enough outside that you should probably want to go inside to a dark, cold theater and watch something that'll just really, inspire you or like relate to in a way you haven't seen put out before. I really think that the visuals in this really demonstrated emotions in a visual way we haven't seen before. I was really surprised in a really phenomenal way of how great the team was and the care they put into making this movie. Thank you guys all again, and check out all their channels. They'll be in the description down below, and we'll see you all next time.
Peace.